We're going to be palpating both palmar and dorsal interossei, and we're going to be starting with the palmar interossei, so I have her palm up. We're going to be going through the actions of palmar interossei just to make sure that our body knows what actions we're going to be doing, and so we can identify the muscle bellies correctly. Palmar interossei is going to be acting on digit number 2, number 4, and number 5, and they adduct. So basically the second digit is going to be brought over towards our third. Our fourth finger is brought over towards our third, and our fifth finger is brought over towards the fourth digit. Palmar interossei is in the deepest layer of the palm, and its origin is actually on the metacarpal that it basically inserts to that same finger. So a good way to remember it is, since we're looking for a muscle that's going to be acting on digit number 2, its origin is on metacarpal number 2. Because it is bringing it over towards the third, it's going to be on the medial side of that same metacarpal. It's going to be a little bit tricky for us to try to palpate down at depth. What we're going to do is, again, identify the location approximately where the shaft is. I'm going to be sinking in between metacarpal number 2 and number 3, and I'm going to ask her to try to bring her pinky over towards her third, like so. I might even provide a little bit of resistance in there. Excellent. And now I'm starting to feel a little bit of muscle tensing up underneath my fingertips. Just going to relax and do that again for me. Great. As I follow it from that shaft of that second metacarpal, it's inserting into the base of the proximal phalanx of that second digit, as well as its dorsal digital expansion. So besides adduction, the secondary actions for this muscle are to include flexion of the metacarpal phalangeal joint while extending both proximal and distal interphalangeal joints. Okay, so there is muscle number 1. Muscle number 2 is going to be originating on the shaft of our fourth metacarpal. Because it's bringing this digit closer, it's going to be on the lateral side. So I'm going to be palpating in between metacarpal number 3 and 4, but hooking my finger towards that fourth one. I'm going to provide her a little bit of resistance here. Excellent. So palpating the origin on the metacarpal's shaft as it crosses and inserts on the lateral side, base of the proximal phalanx of this fourth digit and its dorsal digital expansion. And for our last muscle, the third palmar interossei belly, we're going to palpate on the shaft of our fifth metacarpal, also on the lateral side here, and I'm going to provide her some resistance there. Good. So we'll follow that last muscle belly down, inserting again on the lateral side, base of the proximal phalanx, and the dorsal digital expansion. All 3 of these bellies are going to be innervated by the ulnar nerve. At this point, we're going to be turning the hand over and going on for the palpation of dorsal interossei. So palmar was doing adduction as its primary action. Now dorsal interossei does abduction. So again, we're going to go through the actions with our partner just to make sure that they understand what the fingers are about to do. So for abduction, we already have a muscle in abductor pollicis, and we also have an abductor digiti minimi. So we're really going to be performing abduction of the other 3 digits. So one of our first bellies is going to be abducting the second finger over. The second dorsal interossei will abduct the middle finger towards the second, but the third one will actually abduct the middle finger the opposite direction. So we have 2 dorsal interossei attached to our middle finger, which means it abducts both directions since there is no adductor. The last and fourth of the bellies is going to be doing abduction of the ring finger here, moving it away from the third. Okay, so now that we've kind of gone through the actions of dorsal interossei, there are 4 of them, 1 for the second, 2 for the third, and 1 for the fourth finger. So now we'll go through the origin, insertion, and their palpations. The first one is going to be originating on 2 locations, just like all of the other dorsal interossei muscles, but its first origin is here along the shaft of the first metacarpal. Its second origin is here on the shaft of the second metacarpal. So a lot of text references as adjacent metacarpals, or it could be adjacent metacarpals number 1 and 2. So while palpating in that post-thenar web space, you can ask the person to abduct their second digit out. And it's quite easy to feel a lot of tension inside this muscle. As the two muscle bellies come together and blend, they cross the metacarpal phalangeal joint, inserting here on the lateral side, base of the proximal phalanx of the second digit, as well as its dorsal digital expansion. For the second belly, again, adjacent metacarpals number 2 and 3 this time. So I'm going to sink my finger onto that second, as well as sink my finger onto the third. I'm going to ask my partner to push up against this finger here. Great. So she is abducting her third finger towards her second as I'm sinking in between, finding the two origins. And again, it's going to cross, inserting a similar location on the lateral side, base of the proximal phalanx of the third finger and its dorsal digital expansion. For the third belly, we're going to repeat the process, palpating the shaft of the third, as well as the shaft of the fourth metacarpal. And this time we're going to have her moving her third finger in the opposite direction. So she's going to push against here. Excellent. As we palpate in between those two metacarpals. We're now on the medial side, base of the proximal phalanx of the third finger and the dorsal digital expansion. And repeating ourselves one more time, originating off the shaft of the fourth and the shaft of the fifth metacarpal. In between there, and asking you to abduct this ring finger. We will palpate down, inserting again the medial side, base of the proximal phalanx, and the dorsal digital expansion. Last couple things to mention, just like Palmar Interossei, the primary is the abduction for dorsal, but it also performs flexion of the metacarpal phalangeal joint while extending the two interphalangeal joints due to that dorsal digital expansion. So for dorsal Interossei, that was abduction and flexion of the metacarpal phalangeal while extending the interphalangeal. Both palmar and dorsal Interossei are innervated by the ulnar nerve.